Party town.
Welcome back to Paddle Round the Pier. My name is Vala Viv and I'm here in the VIP tent. Now, politics is always a hot topic, isn't it? Dare I say it, it's the one thing in the world that has the most far-reaching effect on our day-to-day lives. We sent Bill Smith to speak to Caroline Lucas to ask her if she likes avocados. Well, they're green, aren't they?
The farmer's not a farmer.
We're in the Long Man of Wilmington, in the heart of Brighton Pavilion constituency, and I'm joined by Caroline Lucas, who's the newly elected MP for this constituency. Caroline, you must be really happy with such a stunning and historic win.
Well, it is incredibly exciting, and I do feel very honoured and just so grateful to the people of Brighton Pavilion for putting their trust in a new political party, as far as Westminster's concerned, putting their trust in me, and it's down to an awful lot of hard work by an awful lot of people over a very long time.
We always think, of course, in Brighton that Brighton shows the way. Do you think Brighton shows the way?
I absolutely think Brighton shows the way. I mean, on a whole range of different issues, I think that's really true. Just in conventional ways of looking at how people live green lifestyles, for example, Brighton is right up there at the top with people, choosing to try to live more sustainably. It paves the way as well in so many respects, with its culture, with the kinds of things that goes on in the city. So I think it's really appropriate that Brighton Pavilion has made history by electing the first Green.
What are your major national policies, and how far can you go with them as you're not in the government?
Well, I think it's incredibly important to have strong voices challenging the government and showing a different way forward, and I think that's one of my roles. And so, again, people know the Green Party for our environment policies, and clearly will be saying that the government's not going far enough when it comes to tackling climate change, that nuclear power, for example, is a costly distraction. We ought to be investing in energy efficiency, renewables, decentralised energy. But there's also a lot that I think we can do when we're challenging the coalition government on the issue of cuts, for example, the financial cuts that are now going to have this devastating effect on so many people. There are very few voices out there who are saying cuts are not some kind of economic inevitability. They're actually an ideological choice, and that we could be addressing the deficit through a range of tax fairness proposals, if you like. If you looked at tax evasion, tax avoidance, they cost us billions every year, and yet we've got a government that's been cutting tax offices. That doesn't make sense. So I think on a range of issues, from cuts through to the environment, actually through to education as well, things like the Academies programme, those are all places where it's important to have strong voices in opposition challenging the government.
I somehow sense you will be a strong voice.
Well, I'm certainly hoping to be.
And locally in Brighton, obviously the Conservatives are in control here. How many of your policies do you think you can effect in Brighton?
Well, I mean, I mentioned academies a moment ago, and I was just at a meeting earlier this week at Portslade talking about the plans to make Portslade Community College into an academy. Now, the Greens are really a strong voice in the local council saying that is not a step that we should be taking.
What's the biggest issue in Brighton for Caroline Lucas?
Well, I think the way to answer that question is, what is the biggest issue that people are telling me about in Brighton? And I would say certainly that up near the top would be the difficulties of the affordability of living in Brighton. The number of people that have come to me in my surgeries who are talking about the difficulty of getting housing in Brighton, that right now seems to me to be an absolutely major priority. The number of people who are coming in terrible situations, 3 or 4 people in just a one-bedroom or even just a one-room flat, not even one bedroom, one-room flat. So more affordable housing, more social housing, looking more imaginatively at housing co-ops. How we get more people housed in Brighton in an affordable way is an absolute priority.
What do you enjoy in Brighton? What are the great things about Brighton for you?
There are so many things. I love the sea. I love walking along the beach there, but I also love being in the North Lane in particular. Just the vibe that you get from being in all of the cafes, and just the friendliness and the community. I guess community is the strongest word. The fact that we've got such a thriving city of wonderful culture, but then so close to us we've got the South Downs and all of that lovely countryside. So it seems to me that what Brighton does is to combine the best of everything and put it into one place, which of course is what makes it so popular.
What do you love about Brighton?
It's a fantastic place to be. I mean, there are problems in Brighton too, but we need to celebrate what's great about it. And I think that sort of cultural quarter, as you say, that area around the theatre and so forth is just beautiful.
Climate change is obviously one of the main issues, and do you think we have got past that point of no return?
I don't think we are past that point of no return, but we're getting close to it. I mean, I'm not a scientist. I listen to what the majority of scientists are saying, and what they seem to be saying is that really the next 8 to 10 years will be critical in terms of whether we use that period of time really actively to get our emissions, first of all, to peak and then start coming down, or whether or not we miss this window of opportunity. And they explain that because one of the real problems is the kind of cumulative impact of the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, it matters that we act very, very urgently in this next 8 to 10 year window. And that's in a sense what makes this next parliament, this current parliament that I'm in now, so important, because it's really the responsibility of this parliament to get that infrastructure in place to mean that we can shift to more sustainable lifestyles, better quality lifestyles too, actually. So there are some real win-wins out there in terms of the positive impacts it can have on our lives to address climate change, which means it's even more frustrating that they're not doing it.
And Tony Hayward obviously in a bit of a problem at the moment, and the contradictions in politics, because I guess you're not the biggest fan of the oil companies, but then on the other hand, so many people's pensions depend on them.
Well, they do, and you can see that the hugely difficult choices that BP's had to make over the dividends just now. But, whichever way you look at it, what's happened with this crisis in the Gulf is an absolute nightmare. But if it means that people start to think a bit more carefully about ethical pensions, for example, about the risks associated with buying those kinds of shares and so forth, then maybe something can come out of it so that we do recognise that increasingly chasing after fossil fuels is going to be incredibly risky as well as incredibly environmentally damaging.
After your stunning victory in the press and that, there was a lot of talk that maybe there would be a rainbow alliance rather than what we've got. You've had the Liberal Dems joining Labour and the Greens. And then, of course, you might have been Minister of Defence.
Don't worry, Brighton, it didn't happen. Well, yes, there was a lot of discussion, as you say.
Maybe not defence.
No, there was a lot of discussion in the press and the media about what this rainbow alliance might look like. But I can assure you I never received a phone call, so it never got as far as that. I mean, clearly the numbers would have been much more tightly balanced, and you can see that would have been difficult. But I do think it's a tragedy that Labour didn't get into discussions with the Lib Dems. Everything that I've heard, and obviously I'm only looking at it from the outside, but everything that I've heard suggests that Labour almost actually wanted to go away and lick its wounds and sort itself out and have a period of opposition. Well, if I were Minister of Defence, I can absolutely say that Trident wouldn't be around very much longer.
I sort of guessed that.
But just to say that no phone call ever came, so the reality of that Rainbow Coalition never seemed to get off the ground, to be honest. If it had, I think we probably would be having a more progressive government than we have now. And I think that in particular, the way in which the current government seems to be taking a positive glee almost in talking about, cutting the state and getting rid of all of this bloated public sector. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't see very much bloated public sector. What I see is people really struggling to get the kind of public services that they need. And I think that the next few years under this coalition government could be looking pretty grim indeed.
Over the last few years, the football stadium's been a big issue in Brighton. Some Greens were not so keen on it. What's your personal view on the football stadium and the community? What do you think of it now?
Well, speaking personally, I was always happy to have the stadium at Falmer. I think that, the football stadium is incredibly important. Putting it somewhere that's near a station seems to me to be very sensible. I appreciate that there were issues for the local environment. But having been out there myself a couple of times now, been shown around it, I think it's looking fantastic. I think it's really exciting. And as long as they stick to what they're saying about, the ways in which they're going to try to make it as sustainably managed as possible, particularly with some of the transport plans as well, then I think it's just something really to look forward to and welcome, and the rest of my Green colleagues, I think, feel the same.
Well, thank you very much, Caroline, and really congratulations on such a stunning victory in Brighton. Brighton does show the way, and I wish you every success in the next few years with your policies in both the national government or in the national arena and also in Brighton.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm driving down the London road to where I wanna be. Party town. I go rockin' it.
Latest TV rocks. Latest TV rocks.